The chamber was built inside a dying star. Ambassador Marcus Webb had read the reports, studied the holographic models, and prepared himself for months. None of it came close to the reality. The grand atrium of the Galactic Council stretched before him like a wound in the universe itself, carved from crystallized starfire and held together by technologies that human scientists could not even begin to understand. Walkways of pure light crisscrossed an abyss so deep that Marcus could see nebulae swirling in the darkness below his feet. 17,000 species had sent representatives here today. They filled the ascending galleries that spiraled up into infinity, a ride of forms that challenged human imagination. Beings made of living metal sat beside creatures of pure thought. Gas cloud intelligences drifted next to silicon-based hive minds. And above them all, seated on thrones of solidified light, sat the 5 founding species of the Galactic Council, rulers of an empire that had existed for 10,000 years before Earth had even developed fire. Marcus stood alone on the petitioner's circle, a disk of transparent material suspended over the void. Behind him, separated by a force barrier that hummed with barely contained energy, stood Commander Elena Voss and Dr. Theo Graves. They were not allowed to speak. They could only watch as Marcus faced the judgment of gods. The chamber fell silent. 17,000 species held their breath. High Arbiter Kelmaron rose from his throne. He was of Aluxi, a being of living crystal that stood 3 meters tall and radiated light from within his translucent form. When he spoke, his voice resonated through every surface in the chamber, a sound like glaciers grinding against mountains. Species designation: human. Planet of origin: Sol 3. Locally designated Earth. You have been summoned to answer for your transgressions against the Galactic Accord. Marcus did not flinch. His heart pounded in his chest, but 7 years of preparation had taught him to keep his fear hidden. Every diplomatic channel, every backroom negotiation, every carefully planted piece of intelligence had led to this moment. What the Council did not know was that this summons was exactly what humanity wanted. The charges against your species are as follows, Kelmaron continued. Unauthorized faster-than-light development. Colonization of 17 quarantine systems. Contact with protected pre-spacefaring civilizations. The Arbiter paused, and the silence stretched like a blade being drawn. And most severely, the destruction of a Valauxi monitoring station and the deaths of 47 hegemony observers. Gasps rippled through the assembly. Species that had never agreed on anything suddenly shared the same expression of shock. Humanity had barely achieved interstellar travel. They were children in galactic terms, a species that should have been trembling in fear. Yet they had struck against the most powerful empire in the known universe. Marcus looked up at the towering Arbiter, and for the first time, he spoke. His voice was calm, steady, and absolutely certain. We did. The chamber erupted. Translators struggled to keep up with the chaos of 17,000 languages expressing disbelief at the same moment. Representative Orith, the voice of the Sundari Collective, demanded immediate execution of judgment. Counselor Prin of the Kethany Trade Federation called for order, his reptilian eyes calculating the economic implications of this confession. But Marcus was not finished. We destroyed your station, he continued, his voice cutting through the noise. We killed your observers, and we would do it again. Commander Voss closed her eyes behind the force barrier. This was the moment. Either Marcus's gambit would work, or humanity's first contact with galactic civilization would become its last. High Arbiter, Kelmarin's crystalline form shifted colors, cycling through shades that Dr. Graves recognized from his xenolinguistic studies. Surprise, confusion, and beneath it all, something that looked very much like fear. You confess to an act of war against the hegemony, Kelmaron said slowly. Do you understand the consequences of this admission? I understand that you expected us to grovel, Marcus replied. You expected us to beg for mercy, to plead ignorance, to offer whatever tribute you demanded in exchange for our survival. But we are not here to beg. He clasped his hands behind his back. We are here to tell you the truth. He reached into his diplomatic credentials and removed a small data crystal. The chamber's security systems immediately scanned it, found no threats, and allowed him to proceed. 3 months ago, our colony on New Geneva went silent. 200,000 people vanished overnight. No distress calls. No explanations. Just silence. Marcus held up the crystal. When we investigated, we found a Valangsi monitoring station in orbit. Your observers were trying to destroy their databanks when we boarded them. He inserted the crystal into the chamber's display systems. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the holographic projectors activated, and suddenly every being in the chamber could see what humanity had found. The images showed stasis pods. Thousands of them. Inside each one, a human being, suspended in crystalline fluid. Men, women, children. Families torn apart. Communities erased. The data scrolling alongside the images told the rest of the story. Coordinates of collection sites, harvest schedules, genetic analysis results. The Valangsi had been taking humans for decades. You did not summon us here to answer for our crimes, Marcus said, his voice carrying across the stunned silence. You summoned us here to stop us from revealing yours. High Arbiter Kelmaran's form had gone dark, absorbing light instead of radiating it. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper that somehow filled the entire chamber. These records are fabricated. They are authenticated by your own encryption protocols. We did not forge them. We merely stopped you from destroying them. The gallery exploded into chaos. Species were rising from their seats, demanding explanations, threatening withdrawal from the Accord. Observer Ilix of the Wandering Accord, who had not spoken in 400 years of council proceedings, rose slowly from her observation platform. There are older secrets than these, she said, her voice like wind through autumn leaves. If humanity falls here, they will be silenced forever. But if they speak, the questions will never stop. Marcus Webb turned to face the assembly, his back to the most powerful being in the galaxy. We came here knowing we might not leave alive, but we also knew that the truth was worth more than our survival. The Valangsi have been harvesting humanity like cattle, and we have reason to believe we are not the only species they have taken. He looked directly at High Arbiter Kelmaran. So here is our offer. Release our people, all 200,000 of them. Submit to an independent investigation, and we will consider peace. Kelmaran's crystalline form pulsed with barely contained rage. You dare to make demands of the hegemony? Marcus Webb smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. We dare because we have nothing left to lose, and because we know something you do not. He paused, letting the tension build. We know what you are really afraid of. The chamber fell silent again, but this time the silence was different. It was the silence of 17,000 species, realizing that the balance of power had shifted in ways they did not yet understand. And somewhere behind the force barrier, Dr. Theo Graves noticed something that made his blood run cold. High Arbiter Kelmaran was not just angry. He was terrified. Whatever humanity had stumbled upon, it was bigger than harvesting, bigger than politics, bigger than the council itself. And they were only beginning to understand what they had started. The holographic images of imprisoned humans hung in the air above the council chamber like ghosts demanding justice. For the first time in recorded history, the Galactic Council descended into complete chaos. Representatives shouted accusations in 1,000 languages. The Sindari Collective's unified mind fractured momentarily. Millions of individual voices screaming different responses before the hive reasserted control. Councillor Prin's clawed hands gripped the arms, of his throne so tightly that the ancient material cracked beneath his fingers. High Arbiter, Kelmaron stood frozen at the center of it all, his crystalline form no longer radiating the confident light of authority. Instead, he had become a dark pillar, absorbing every ray of light that touched him, a storm given physical shape. "Silence," he commanded. The word resonated through the chamber with such force that even the most agitated species fell quiet. "The council will have order." Ambassador Marcus Webb remained on the petitioner's circle, his hands still clasped behind his back. Behind the force barrier, Commander Voss watched him with growing unease. They had planned for many outcomes, but this level of chaos had not been among them. "The human evidence will be examined," Kelmaron continued, his voice strained. "A recess is called. The delegation will be escorted to secure quarters." "Secure quarters," Marcus repeated. "You mean a cell." "I mean protection. You have made accusations against the founding species of this council. There are many here who would see you silenced before any investigation can occur." It was a threat disguised as concern, and everyone in the chamber knew it. But Martsu had no choice. The council guards surrounded the human delegation, their weapons not quite aimed, but clearly ready, and escorted them through a side passage into the depths of the station. The secure quarters were comfortable enough, a suite of rooms with viewports overlooking the captured nebulae that filled the station's central void. But the locked door and armed guards outside made the true nature of their situation clear. "We knew this might happen," Dr. Graves said as soon as they were alone. He pulled a small scanning device from his pocket and swept the room for listening devices. "The Veluxi could not let our accusations stand unchallenged. They had to control the narrative." "They're going to bury it," Commander Voss said flatly. "Declare our evidence fabricated, execute us for the attack on their station, and make sure no one ever speaks of this again. Maybe not." Marcus moved to the viewport and stared out at the swirling colors of the nebulae. "Did you see how the council reacted?" The Sindari collective lost cohesion for the first time in 1,000 years. The Kethani were calculating trade implications before Kelmaron even finished speaking. And the Wandering Accord, he turned to face them. Observer Ilix spoke. "She has not spoken in 400 years. Something we said reached her." "Reached her how?" Voss asked. "I do not know yet, but we have allies in that chamber. Hidden ones, perhaps, but allies nonetheless." Before anyone could respond, the door chimed. A guard entered, followed by an unexpected visitor. Counselor Prin of the Kethani Trade Federation slithered into the room, his reptilian body moving with unsettling grace. His eyes, cold and calculating, fixed on Marcus immediately. "Ambassador Webb, I come with a proposal. I'm listening." Prin gestured, and the guards stepped outside. "The Kethani have no love for the Veluxi. Their hegemony has strangled galactic trade for millennia, forcing us to operate within their rules, their territories, their price structures. If what you have shown the Council is true, it represents an opportunity." "An opportunity for what?" "For change." Prin's forked tongue flickered. "The Kethani control 40% of galactic commerce. If we throw our support behind humanity, other species will follow. The balance of power could shift." Marcus studied the reptilian counselor carefully. "And what would you want in return?" "Exclusive trading rights with Earth, access to human markets, favorable tariff structures for Kethani merchants." Prin's lips curled into something that might have been a smile. "Think of it as a partnership that makes humanity dependent on Kethani goodwill, a partnership that keeps humanity alive." Marcus shook his head slowly. "We did not come here to trade one master for another, Counselor. We came here to be free." Prin's eyes narrowed. "Then you are fools. The Veluxi have ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years. No species has ever challenged them and survived. Then we will be the first." The counselor stared at him for a long moment, then let out a hissing laugh. "I almost hope you succeed, Ambassador. It would be entertaining to watch." He turned toward the door. "But do not say I did not warn you." After Prin left, Dr. Graves pulled the data crystal from his pocket. "I have been analyzing the files we recovered. There is something in here that changes everything." "What did you find?" Graves activated a small holographic display. The collection of humans was not random. The Volugsi were targeting specific genetic markers, specific traits, adaptability, resilience, creativity under pressure. He looked up. "But that is not the worst part. Tell me, humanity is not the only species being harvested. I found references to at least 200 others, most of them young civilizations that never made it to the interstellar stage. They were collected, studied, and then—" He paused. "The files are incomplete, but one phrase keeps appearing. Integration protocol." Voss leaned forward. "What does that mean?" "I think it means the Volugsi did not evolve naturally. Their crystalline forms are too perfect, too designed. I believe they were built, assembled over millions of years from the genetic material of harvested species." Graves' voice dropped to a whisper. "They are adding the best traits of every civilization they encounter to themselves. And they want to add humanity next." The implications hung in the air like poison. "We are not just prisoners to them," Marcus said slowly. "We are raw materials." Before anyone could respond, alarms began to sound throughout the station. The viewport flashed red as external shields activated. Commander Voss moved to the door and found the guards gone, replaced by empty corridors filled with running figures. Something is happening in the main chamber. They had no choice but to follow the chaos. The corridors of the council station were designed for species of every size and shape, wide enough for giants to walk beside beings no larger than insects. Now they were filled with delegates of 100 civilizations, all moving in the same direction, all wearing the same expression of shock and fear. When they reached the gallery overlooking the grand atrium, Marcus understood why. The chamber had divided. Physically, visibly divided. Half the species had moved to one side of the vast space, clustering around the thrones of the founding members. The other half had moved to the opposite side, gathering beneath the observation platforms of the Wandering Accord. The Galactic Council was tearing itself apart. High Arbiter Kelmaron stood at the center, his crystalline form now cycling through color so rapidly that he seemed to strobe. His voice boomed across the divide. "The Volugsi hegemony invokes the protocol of silence. All discussion of human evidence is forbidden. All records will be destroyed. All witnesses will be contained." He turned his dark gaze toward the gallery where the human delegation stood, including the humans. "Commander." Voss reached instinctively for a weapon that had been confiscated hours ago. Dr. Graves calculated the odds of escape and found them impossible. But Ambassador Marcus Webb simply straightened his shoulders and prepared to speak the words that would change galactic history forever. "We reject your protocol. We reject your authority. And we reject your right to judge us." He turned his back on the Arbiter. "Humanity is leaving, and we invite every species in this chamber who values truth over tyranny to leave with us." The silence that followed was the loudest sound Marcus had ever heard. No species in the history of the Galactic Council had ever walked away from a formal proceeding. The chamber itself seemed to hold its breath as Ambassador Marcus Webb took his first step toward the exit. The distance from the gallery to the chamber doors was exactly 300 meters. Marcus had not measured this corridor, but he knew that every step would be watched, analyzed, and remembered for generations. Behind him, Commander Voss and Dr. Graves fell into formation. Their footsteps echoed in the silence. Then something impossible happened. Observer, Ilix of the Wandering Accord rose from her platform. Her movement was slow, deliberate, and carried the weight of 600 years of silence. The ancient being, who had watched council proceedings without taking sides since before humanity discovered electricity, stepped down from her observation seat. She began walking toward the humans. Gasps filled the chamber. The Wandering Accord had existed as neutral observers for millennia, bound by ancient treaties to never interfere in council politics. Ilix's action was not just unexpected. It was unprecedented. She reached the human delegation just as they passed the midpoint of the chamber. She said nothing. She simply fell into step beside them, her ethereal form gliding over the crystalline floor like mist over water. Representative Orath screamed through the Singari Collective's unified voice. This is treason against the Accord itself. Ilix has no authority to bind the Wandering to the humans. But other members of the Wandering Accord were rising. One by one, dozens of species who had existed on the margins of galactic civilization for millennia began moving toward the exit. They were not bound by Ilix's choice, yet they chose to follow. High Arbiter Kelmeron slammed his crystalline fist against his throne. The sound echoed like thunder. Activate chamber security. No one leaves until judgment is rendered. Force barriers shimmered into existence across every exit. The corridor ahead of Marcus filled with a wall of barely visible energy, strong enough to stop a starship. Commander Voss assessed the situation instantly. They were trapped. The Valuxi had overwhelming force. Any physical resistance would be suicide. But Marcus did not slow his pace. He walked directly toward the force barrier, as if it did not exist. "You cannot hold us," he said calmly. "And you cannot stop what has already begun." Dr. Graves reached into his diplomatic credentials and activated a small device hidden within. Throughout the galaxy, on 1,000 worlds, encrypted transmissions began to broadcast. Every species with faster-than-light communication received the same data package, the evidence of Vilaxi harvesting, the names of the species already lost, and a simple message that would echo across the stars. The truth cannot be silenced. The Council has betrayed you. Humanity stands with those who seek justice. Marcus reached the force barrier and stopped. He turned to face High Arbiter Kelmeron one final time, his voice carrying across the vastness of the chamber. "You have two choices. Let us leave and face the questions that every species in this galaxy will now be asking. Or kill us here in front of 17,000 witnesses and confirm everything we have said about you." The chamber descended into argument. Counselor Prin rose from his throne, his reptilian voice cutting through the noise. "The Kethany Trade Federation withdraws its support from the Protocol of Silence. We demand a full investigation." The fracture deepened. Species who had been vassal states of the Valuxi for centuries began to murmur among themselves. The Singari Collective experienced something it had not felt in 1,000 years. Dissent within the hive mind. Individual voices were questioning, doubting, breaking free of consensus. High Arbiter Kelmeron's crystalline form shifted through a spectrum of emotions: rage, fear, calculation, and finally, something that might have been resignation. "You think you have won something," he said to Marcus. "You think you have struck a blow against the hegemony. But you understand nothing." His voice dropped to something almost like a whisper, yet it carried to every corner of the chamber. The harvesting was not cruelty. It was necessity. It was survival. When you learn what is coming, you will beg us to take you. Marcus did not take the bait. Lower the barriers. For a long moment, nothing happened. The force barriers hummed with power. 17,000 species watched in silence. Then, slowly, the barriers flickered and died. The human delegation resumed their march toward the exit. Behind them, hundreds of species joined the procession. The wandering Accord moved as one. Several Cathany trading houses abandoned their seats. A dozen minor species, who had endured Veluxy, protection for generations, saw their chance and took it. But not everyone walked. Thousands of species remained in their seats, watching, waiting. They were not convinced. They were afraid. The Velusk had ruled for 10,000 years. One act of defiance meant nothing against that weight of history. As the humans reached the chamber doors, Kelmaron spoke one final time. His voice carried across the vastness with ancient power. You have 40 standard rotations to reconsider. Return to this chamber and submit to judgment, and the council will show mercy. Refuse, and the hegemony will respond as it has always responded to species who challenge the Accord. He paused. His crystalline form darkened to pure black. We will erase you. Marcus did not look back. He stepped through the chamber doors into the corridor beyond. For a moment, it seemed like they had escaped. Freedom was just ahead. Their ship was docked in the visitor's bay. Fueled and ready. Then Commander Voss saw what was waiting for them. The corridor was not empty. Standing in perfect formation. Blocking the path to their ship were 700 Veluxy Guardians. Each one stood 3 meters tall, their crystalline bodies shaped for war. These were not diplomats or observers. These were the elite warriors of the hegemony, killers who had conquered entire worlds single-handedly. Their internal light pulsed in synchronization, a heartbeat of pure menace. Behind them, visible through the transparent walls of the station, was a Velesi battle fleet. 63 warships hung in the void, their weapons arrays pointed at the human vessel. Each ship was powerful enough to reduce a planet to ash. Together, they represented more firepower than humanity had ever conceived. High Arbiter, Kelmarin's voice echoed from hidden speakers throughout the corridor. Did you truly believe we would let you leave? The hundreds of species who had followed humanity froze in terror. Observer Ilix's ethereal form flickered with uncertainty. The minor species who had seen their chance for freedom now saw only death. Commander Voss stepped forward, placing herself between the ambassador and the wall of crystalline warriors. She had no weapon. She had no armor. She had nothing but her training and her determination. Get behind me, she said quietly. All of you. Marcus Webb shook his head slowly. A strange calm had settled over his features. That was never the plan, Elena. Voss turned to look at him. What plan? Marcus, what have you done? He smiled. It was the same calm, knowing smile that had unsettled diplomats across the galaxy. I told you. We have been preparing for this moment for 7 years. He reached into his diplomatic credentials and removed a second device, one that Voss had never seen before. It was small, no larger than a coin, and it pulsed with a soft blue light. Lighthouse Protocol, Marcus said clearly. Activate. Throughout Veluxy-controlled space, 17 human fleets began to move. They had been hiding in the colonies that the Council called unauthorized, waiting for exactly this signal. They were not heading toward the Council station. That would have been suicide. They were heading toward 17 Veluxy worlds, nursery worlds, production facilities, the crystalline gardens where new Veluxy were grown. Marcus Webb looked up at the nearest guardian and spoke in a voice that carried to every corner of the corridor. Attack us, and your nurseries burn. Attack our colonies, and your nurseries burn. Let us leave peacefully, and our fleets will withdraw. He stepped forward, standing face to face with a being that could kill him with a single blow. Your move, Arbiter. The corridor fell silent. 700 guardians awaited orders. 63 warships held position. And somewhere across the galaxy, 17 human fleets waited with their fingers on the trigger. The most powerful civilization in the known universe had just discovered that humanity was not the helpless prey they had assumed. The game had only just begun. Ambassador Marcus Webb stood face with 700 Veluxi Guardians, his heart pounding against his ribs like a caged animal. The crystalline warriors towered above him, their internal light pulsing with barely contained violence. One wrong word, one wrong movement, and they would tear through the human delegation like a scythe through wheat. But they did not move. High, Arbiter Kelmoran's voice crackled through the corridor speakers. Strained with an emotion the Veluxi rarely displayed. You are bluffing. Humanity does not have the technology to threaten Veluxi worlds. Marcus kept his voice steady. We found your collection facility, Arbiter. We studied the bodies of your observers. We learned how you build yourselves. He paused, letting the implication hang in the air. And we learned how to unbuild you. Impossible. Your crystalline structure has a resonance frequency, a specific harmonic vibration that, if applied correctly, shatters your forms from the inside. Marcus held up a small device. We call them Shattersingers. One of these can destroy a guardian in seconds. Our fleets carry thousands. For the first time in 10,000 years, High Arbiter Kelmaran experienced something he had not felt since he was newly formed. Consciousness, vulnerability, the standoff stretched. Minutes passed like hours. Commander Voss stood ready to fight, knowing it would be futile, but refusing to show fear. Dr. Graves watched the Guardians with analytical eyes, noting the subtle shifts in their crystalline structures that indicated uncertainty. Behind the human delegation, hundreds of alien species waited in terrified silence, their fates tied to whatever happened next. Observer Ilix stepped forward, her ethereal form gliding between the humans and the Guardians. Arbiter, the galaxy is watching. Every species with faster-than-light communication has received humanity's broadcast. If you destroy them now, you prove their accusations true. You will face rebellion across 100 sectors. Counselor Prin's voice echoed from somewhere behind them. The Kethany had followed the procession, watching with calculating eyes. The Kethany will not support a war that destroys galactic trade. Stand down your forces. Even the Sindari Collective spoke, their unified voice carrying the weight of 1,000,000 minds. The Hive has calculated the outcomes. Open conflict reduces galactic civilization's survival probability by 67.4%. We withdraw our support for military action. High Arbiter Kelmaran stood alone. The species who had supported the Veluxi for millennia were abandoning him. The secrets his kind had kept for 10,000 years were exposed, and the primitive species he had dismissed as livestock were holding a blade to his empire's throat. He raised one crystalline hand. The Guardians lowered their weapons. The Veluxi hegemony will allow the human delegation to depart. His voice was cold, dead, carrying the weight of humiliation. But this is not over, Ambassador Webb. You have made enemies today that your species cannot comprehend. Marcus nodded slowly. Perhaps. But we have also made something else. He gestured to the hundreds of species standing behind him. We have made friends. The procession resumed. The Guardians parted like a crystalline sea, and the human delegation walked through the gap toward the docking bay. Their ship waited where they had left it, surrounded by armed guards, who now stepped aside without protest. As they crossed the threshold into their vessel, Marcus allowed himself a moment of relief. They had done it. They had walked into the heart of galactic power, exposed its darkest secrets, and walked out alive. Then Commander Voss grabbed his arm, her face pale as death. Marcus. Her voice was barely a whisper. Earth is under attack. The words did not make sense at first. Earth was light years away. The Veluxi fleet was here, at the Council Station. How could Earth be under attack? But Voss's tactical display told the truth. While every eye in the galaxy was fixed on the drama in the council chamber, a Veluxy strike fleet had slipped through human defenses. 12 warships, hidden in monitoring stations that humanity had never detected, had activated the moment Marcus revealed his evidence. They had reached Earth orbit 3 hours ago. How is this possible? Dr. Graves demanded, his analytical mind struggling to process the information. Our defenses should have detected them. They were already inside our system, Marcus said, understanding flooding through him like ice water. They have been for years. Monitoring stations, collection facilities. We found one, but there were others. His voice cracked. I gambled that our deterrent would stop them. I was wrong. The ship launched from the council station at maximum speed, tearing through space toward the nearest hyperspace lane. Behind them, the political chaos of the council continued, but it no longer mattered. Everything that mattered was happening at Earth, that the reports that came through during the journey were devastating. Luna Base had fallen in the first hour. The orbital defense platforms were debris. Veluxy landing craft were descending on every major population center, not to destroy, but to collect. They were harvesting humanity on an industrial scale, but humanity was fighting back in cities across the globe. Resistance formed within hours. A retired general named Robert Kane organized fighters in New York, using subway tunnels and pre-war bunkers to launch guerrilla strikes against the crystalline invaders. In Tokyo, a young engineer named Yuki Tanaka used the schematics from humanity's broadcast to build improvised shattersingers from recycled electronics. In Lagos, a coalition of African nations deployed experimental energy shields that had been developed in secret for exactly this scenario. The Veluxy expected a quick harvest. Instead, they found a species that would rather die than be taken. When the human diplomatic vessel dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, Marcus Webb saw something that made his heart stop. The 17 colonial fleets had abandoned their positions at the Veluxy nursery worlds. Every ship, every fighter, every weapon they possessed was here, engaging the hegemony strike force in a battle that lit up the darkness of space like a new sun. They came, Voss whispered. They came back. A voice crackled over the communication system. Ambassador Webb, this is Admiral Petra Holcomb of the new Geneva Fleet. Did you think we would let Earth fall? You gave us back our people. Now we return the favor. The colonial fleets were not just military assets. When humanity recovered the stasis pods from the Veluxy collection facility, they had not simply freed the prisoners. They had recruited and got 200,000 humans who had been taken by the Veluxy over decades, many of whom had been studied and enhanced by Veluxy science, had been given a choice: return to normal life or join the fight. They had chosen to fight, and they brought with them something the Veluxy never expected: intimate knowledge of hegemony technology, tactics, and weaknesses. The battle turned. Shattersingers tore through Guardian boarding parties. Colonial ships exploited vulnerabilities in Veluxy hull designs that only someone who had been inside a Veluxy vessel would know. The strike force, designed for quick extraction against minimal resistance, found itself facing a humanity that knew their secrets. But victory was not free. Commander Voss led a boarding party onto the Veluxy flagship to disable its core before it could glass the eastern seaboard in a final act of spite. The fighting was brutal. Guardians did not surrender. They did not retreat. They fought until their crystalline forms, shattered beyond repair. Voss reached the core chamber alone. Every member of her team had fallen. The Veluxy commander, a massive crystalline being named Arkelos, who had conquered 17 worlds, stood between her and the core. One human, Arkelos said, his voice like breaking glass. You think one human can stop me? Voss raised her Shattersinger, her hand steady despite the exhaustion burning through every muscle. I think one human is all it takes. The battle was short. Voss was faster, her weapon designed for exactly this purpose. But Arkelos landed a blow that shattered her left arm before he fell. She screamed, but she did not stop. She triggered the core overload with her remaining hand and barely made it to an escape pod before the flagship tore itself apart in the void above Earth. The last Veluxi warship exploded in a cascade of crystalline fragments. A strike force was destroyed. The harvest had failed. Humanity had survived. But as Marcus Webb looked out at the debris field that now orbited his homeworld, he knew this was not the end. It was only the beginning. The Veluxi would return. And next time, they would bring everything they had. 40 rotations. That was all the time they had to prepare for what was coming. It would have to be enough. The sky above. New York was filled with debris. Fragments of Veluxi warships caught the sunlight as they fell through the atmosphere, burning trails of crystalline fire across the heavens. On the streets below, billions of humans looked up at the wreckage of their enemies and felt something they had never felt before. A terrible weight of victory. Ambassador Marcus Webb stood on the steps of the United Nations, facing a crowd that stretched to the horizon. Behind him, holographic displays showed the faces of representatives from 37 alien species, the coalition that had followed humanity out of the council chamber. Some of them were ancient civilizations that had hidden in the margins of galactic society for millennia. Others were young species, like humanity, who had been targeted by the Veluxi and never knew why. Now they all stood together. Today, we proved something the galaxy has never seen, Marcus began, his voice carrying across the crowd through speakers and broadcasts to every corner of the planet. We proved that the Galactic Council is not invincible. We proved that secrets cannot be kept forever. We proved that humanity will not be harvested, will not be silenced, will not be erased. In the crowd, Robert Kane stood with his resistance fighters from New York. They were battered and exhausted, having spent 3 days fighting crystalline monsters in the subway tunnels beneath Manhattan. But they were alive. They had held the line until the fleets arrived. Beside him, Yuki Tanaka clutched a shattersinger she had built with her own hands. The device had saved her life twice during the battle for Tokyo. She was already thinking about improvements, about how to make them smaller, stronger, more effective. Humanity would need every advantage they could create. But today is also a warning, Marcus continued, his voice growing heavy. The Veluxi will return. The hegemony will not forget this humiliation. We have 40 rotations before they come for us with their full strength. 40 rotations to prepare. 40 rotations to build alliances, to strengthen our defenses, to become something the galaxy has never seen before. Commander Elena Voss stood at the edge of the platform, her left arm encased in a regeneration cast that hummed with advanced medical technology provided by their new alien allies. The doctor said she would have full use of the arm within a week. She did not intend to rest that long. There was too much work to do. Dr. Theo Graves stood beside her, holding the data crystal that had started everything. The evidence of Veluxi harvesting, the genetic analysis, the references to the integration protocol. There was still so much they did not understand about their enemy. But understanding would come. Humanity was very good at learning. They think we are a young species, Marcus said, his voice rising. Naive, weak. They think our defiance was a fluke, a lucky gamble that will not be repeated. He paused, letting the silence build. Let them think that. Let them underestimate us. Because when they come, they will learn the truth that every enemy of humanity has learned. Behind him, the alien representatives bowed their heads in acknowledgement. Observer Ilix, whose decision to walk beside humanity had shattered 600 years of neutrality, stood at the center of the holographic display. Her ethereal form radiated something that might have been hope. We are not just survivors, Marcus declared. We are not just fighters. We are the species that walked away from the Galactic Council and lived to tell the tale. His voice rose, carried across the world and beyond to the stars themselves. We are humanity, and we are just getting started. The crowd erupted. Billions of voices rose in a roar of defiance and determination that seemed to shake the very foundations of the planet. Across the globe, in cities and villages, in bunkers and hospitals, in the ships orbiting overhead, humanity celebrated not just their survival, but their transformation. They were no longer alone in the universe. They were no longer prey. They were something new. In the weeks that followed, the real work began. Human engineers worked alongside alien scientists to reverse engineer Veluxy technology. Military commanders from 37 species gathered in Geneva to coordinate defense strategies. Diplomats traveled to distant worlds, building the foundations of an alliance that could challenge the hegemony. And in a quiet hospital room overlooking San Francisco Bay, Commander Voss received an unexpected visitor. The being that entered her room was unlike anything she had ever seen. It was Veluxy, but different. Its crystalline form was almost transparent, ancient beyond measure, and it radiated not hostility, but something that felt almost like sorrow. "I am called the Elder," the being said, its voice like wind through leaves. "I am the oldest of my kind, and I have come to tell you the truth that High Arbiter Kelmaran was afraid to speak." Voss reached for her weapon, but the Elder raised a hand. "I mean you no harm. I mean no harm to any of your kind. That is why I am here." The ancient being moved to the window, gazing out at the bay. The harvesting was real. The integration protocol was real. Everything your ambassador revealed was true. But there was a reason for it. A terrible reason. What reason could justify what you did to us? The Elder turned to face her. Survival. Not ours. Everyone's. The being's crystalline form flickered with ancient memories. 10,000 years ago, we detected something at the edge of the galaxy. A signal. A warning. Something is coming from the void between galaxies. Something that has destroyed civilizations far older and more powerful than ours. Something that hungers for everything we are. Voss felt ice form in her stomach. What is it? We do not know. We have never seen it clearly. But the civilizations that once filled the spaces between stars, the empires that ruled before even the Veluxy existed, they are all gone, erased, as if they never were. The Elder's voice dropped to a whisper. We began the harvesting because we believed we could build ourselves stronger, more adaptable, more resilient. We believed that by incorporating the best traits of every species we encountered, we could become powerful enough to face what is coming. And humanity? Humanity is the key. Your adaptability, your resilience, your impossible creativity. These are traits we have never encountered before. Traits that cannot be replicated through integration. Traits that must be partnered with. The Elder turned fully to face her. We were wrong to try to harvest you. We were wrong to treat you as raw materials. Ambassador Webb showed us that. But the threat remains, and we cannot face it alone. Voss stared at the ancient being, her mind racing. You want an alliance. After everything you did to us, I want survival. For all of us. The hegemony will take time to accept this truth. Kelmaran is proud and afraid, but others among my kind see what I see. The Elder moved toward the door. When the darkness comes, humanity will not be able to hide behind defiance alone. You will need allies, real allies, and we will need you. The being paused at the threshold. 40 rotations. That is how long you have before the hegemony returns. Use that time wisely, because after that, the true war begins. The Elder vanished, leaving Voss alone with questions that had no answers. That night, she told Marcus and Graves everything. They sat in silence for a long time, processing the implications. "If the Elder is telling the truth," Graves said finally, "then the Veluxi are not our greatest enemy." "They never were." "If," Marcus repeated. "That is a very large if." "But if they are right," Voss said quietly, "then everything we have done, everything we have built, everything we have sacrificed, it is just the beginning." Marcus stood and walked to the window. Outside, the lights of San Francisco glittered beneath a sky filled with stars. Somewhere out there, in the void between galaxies, something was waiting. "Then we prepare for both," he said. "We prepare for the Veluxi. We prepare for whatever the Elder warned us about. And we make sure that when the darkness comes, humanity is ready." He turned to face his friends, his allies, the people who had walked beside him through the impossible. "We walked away from the Galactic Council. We survived the attack on Earth. We built an alliance from nothing." A smile crossed his face, tired but determined. "Whatever is coming, they have never faced anything like us." In the darkness between galaxies, something stirred. It had been sleeping for a very long time, waiting for the right moment. Now, at last, the civilizations of this galaxy had grown strong. Enough to be interesting, strong enough to be worth consuming, the hunger awoke, and far away. On a small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable star, humanity prepared to face whatever came next. They had walked away from the judgment of gods. Now they would learn what that really meant.